Joining us now is one of those people who's been targeted by the sanctions, the Conservative MP, Tim Loughton. Mr. Loughton, thank you very much indeed for joining us. What's your response to being sanctioned by the Chinese?
Well, I don't know what it involves. I've not had any formal notification. I'm waiting for the postman to come to see if there's a letter in the post saying I've been officially debarred. Am I going to get a sort of Amazon Prime delivery of a certificate of debarment? I found out about it by Twitter, as did all my colleagues. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary. The government this week announced sanctions, quite rightly, against China. I certainly supported those, together with 29 other countries. And the response of China is to then sanction 5 backbench Conservative MPs, a couple of members of the House of Lords, an academic and a lawyer. It's a very strange response, and I think underlines the Chinese complete lack of understanding of how a democracy works, and that in a democracy and in Parliament, we can speak out where we see abuses happening, and abuse is happening on an industrial scale in China, and it needs to be called out, and that's what we've done.
Some of those who've been sanctioned have said that they have been harassed on social media. Have you been harassed?
I have been harassed on social media, not nearly as much as my colleague Nusrat Ghani, who raised this in Parliament earlier this week. Some really nasty abuse she's been getting on social media. I've had intimidation from the Chinese embassy in the past. I've been a long-standing critic of China. I chair the all-party Tibet group. So over many years, I've stood up for the cause of the Tibetan people being oppressed by the Chinese government, and I've had warnings from the Chinese embassy that I might not want to go and attend parliamentary events, conferences with other like-minded parliamentarians. So this is nothing new, but I mean, this is just be so badly handled, and this will only re-fortify the determination of those of us who want to call China out for these abuses. And the whole world needs to be calling out China for these abuses. And this is a great way of drawing attention to that cause and uniting more democratic, freedom-loving people against the oppression that China metes out to its own people.
One of the things apparently is going to be a ban on going to China, but I suspect you pretty much had a ban against you, as indeed many journalists have for quite a long time.
I don't know. I think I can live with that. And I have been asking, as have other members of the Parliamentary Tibet group, to go and visit China, specifically to visit Tibet, so they can tell us how everything is wonderful, and really all these stories about Tibetans being arrested, tortured, and killed in too many cases are all fantasy. Alas, all those requests for a visit have been turned down. The British ambassador in China has not been into Tibet since 2017, and whenever Western officials or diplomats are allowed into Xinjiang, Tibet, or whatever, it's heavily managed, and they're not really allowed to have free reign. If China thinks we're spreading lies and misconceptions and deceptions, let us go and see. Show us. Let the parliamentarians in. Let journalists in. Let human rights groups in, and show us that we're wrong. But until then, we will call China out for the horrendous human rights abuses that many of us feel, certainly with the Uyghurs, amount to genocide, and China needs to be held to account for it.
I know we can see the Tibetan flag behind you in your office there. What do you say to those who say, look, China is a big country, it's the growing superpower, we've got to have relations with it, and frankly, this is none of our business?
China is a growing superpower. China is a very important economic force in the world, which means that China has to act in a way that 21st century democracies do, and has to act as an adult, must not be in denial about the abuses going on in its country. And if it genuinely wants to have an open trading relationship with other nations around the world, particularly Western democracies, then there is a basic set of standards that it needs to live up to, and it needs to be transparent about how it is living up to those standards or not. And a basic standard is that you don't torture your own citizens. You don't oppress people simply because they come from a religious minority. You don't arrest people simply on the grounds that they happen to have a photograph of the Dalai Lama, as is an arrestable offence in Tibet. They also need to open up for their standards of their practices in their factories, which is why I'm glad the British government brought in the restrictions on British companies trading with sweatshops, effectively slave labour-led sweatshops in Xinjiang. And China also needs to be a responsible nation on environmental matters.
But if they don't respond, if they go on threatening and people such as yourself, what do we do? Do we have to impose tougher and tougher sanctions and basically isolate China? Can we do that even?
We must. And the problem is that this has gone on for so long because China gets away with it. And there has to be implications from China's actions, which is why I'm pleased with the government has announced the various measures it has in recent weeks. The Magnitsky sanctions on 4 Chinese officials this week, it needs to be much more. That restriction on businesses dealing with slave labour operations in Xinjiang province, we need to extend that. And the amendment that went into the trade bill that wasn't quite as robust as many of us would have liked, but effectively introduces genocide as a consideration for trade as well. These are all good measures, but we need to go so much further, and we need to be working in an international alliance. We work this week with the EU members, with America and Canada, but there's a growing number of democracies around the world who I think have rumbled China and know that we cannot deal with them as a normal trading partner when they allow this sort of abuse to go on in their own country. And they try to bully people who stand up against it. And I'm being bullied along with my other parliamentary colleagues, and we're not going to stand up for it.
Mr. Loughton, thank you very much indeed for joining us.